Good morning and welcome to the NetPoint GPM Conference 2024. I'm so glad so many of you could sign in from around the world, and we have a great agenda ahead for the day. I'm kicking it off. I'm the warm-up act. Going to talk about how to use NetPoint for project planning. I'm going to actually show you how to use it for project planning, not just talk about it. And then up next, we will have the algorithmic as-built schedule, one of our latest innovations by Dr. Guy and Dr. Vivek will be presenting that, related to GPM and forensic scheduling. And then between 11 and 12, we're going to have a great presentation from our innovation group about, a great innovation presentation about our new software that's coming out and its functionality in what-if analysis. And then we're going to have a break for lunch. After lunch, we'll be talking about harnessing the power of NetPoint in Project Summit for manufacturing and infrastructure project delivery. This is a case study, really well put together. And then between 2 and 3, a great assessment of using NetPoint in master schedule development. So packed schedule, we're looking forward to the day, and we're going to kick it off with this training that is starting right now. So let me switch you into NetPoint, and let's kick it off. Here we are in a blank canvas of NetPoint. Before we get into that, I'm just going to talk about myself a little bit and describe what we're going to do in the training. So I'm Tim Mather, as you can see from my screen, and I'm the COO of PMA Technologies. And I've been involved with NetPoint since it was conceived of in the mid-2000s, 2005, 2006 maybe. We started working on it, first release 2008, and it's been commercial since then. And just a great tool. I love the way people engage with NetPoint and the way it offers a visual representation, interactive, graphical, visual representation of a schedule, which is obviously an unmet need until NetPoint came along within the industry. So today in our training, we're just going to talk about, from a tabula rasa, a blank tablet here, what are the first steps you should do when you're putting a NetPoint schedule together. And then we're going to move on to how do you add objects to the screen, and how do you set calendars if you want multiple calendars in your project. We're also going to talk about how to link objects together, how to push activities around and show how the interactivity works. We're going to work on building some resources and adding a resource histogram to the schedule. And we're going to talk about dropping a data date and progressing a schedule, and also comparing baseline schedule with an update schedule. So we have that coming up, and we're also going to talk a little bit about import and export. So that'll be a pretty full time section here, and I'm going to leave time at the end for questions as well. So you can chat your questions in. We have moderators who'll keep track of those for you. So let's kick it off. When you first start using a NetPoint schedule, when you have this first blank schedule, let's go up here and let's talk about how to set the schedule calendar. So you can go to Modify Schedule Properties. And in Modify Schedule Properties, when you go to Dates, you'll see you've got the calendar dates here and the project dates here. So when you're adjusting the calendar dates, it should be about a month before and a month after you're expecting the project to last. So the calendar should be larger than the project dates. It actually has to be larger or equal to the project dates. So one trick that is helpful to know is if you make an adjustment here, let's say that we want to go to 2024 instead of 2023, you can make that adjustment just with this arrow button here. And so you don't have to go month by month through the calendar to adjust it. So if you want to go month by month, you can do it this way. And then you have to actually pick a date on the calendar in order for it to fill in. So once you've adjusted those, if you don't have any objects yet on your screen, if you haven't placed any objects on the canvas, then you can use this autofill function. And what that will do is it will adjust the date of the project start and project end so it fits within your new calendar dates. And that's a little bit of a time saver. While I'm here, I'll talk about time units. We typically schedule in days, but there are situations where you may have a very long planning window, like maybe 10 or 15 years, in which case maybe you want to go by quarter or by month. And so the precision's a little lower, but you can get the whole plan right there on the canvas. I'm going to stick for days for our example. So now you have the blank canvas, you've got your calendar set, and you can just click OK here. And then we're going to move to look at the print layout. Why, Tim, are you talking about print layout at the very start of this project? It's because NetPoint is truly WYSIWYG. And a WYSIWYG tool means that what you see is what you get. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that the tool is aligned with how you want it to print out at the end. So for instance, if you have a stakeholder who says, I only want 8.5 by 11, then make sure that your document here in NetPoint, your schedule is set up to be 8.5 by 11. I usually switch to Adobe because that's kind of a universal print driver, easier to share around to people. So I'm going to leave this at letter size, but you can, once you're in Adobe, you could make it a plotter size or whatever works. The thing you don't want to do is build a plan and then change the size of the page. So that's an important first step. Excuse me. So now we have this blank canvas. We have the printer page set up. We have the calendar set up. And now we can start adding activities to the canvas. So up here across the top, you'll see a bunch of little buttons and banners and icons. And I'm going to just kind of run through a few of them, demonstrating how they're used while we use the tool. So I have right now selected this arrow, the select tool. There's a select plus where you can select multiple items at the same time. And then there's also a hand to kind of move around the canvas. But I'm going to stick with this select tool and I'm going to select an activity. Once you've done that, you come down here and you'll start to see that the crosshairs there are giving you a day of the week, and they're also giving you the date. And that's helpful when you're planning. You'll also see, for instance, here, 2/11/24, that's showing red, and it's red on a Sunday. And that is true because, excuse me, that's true because we have a 5-day work calendar here. So Saturdays and Sundays are not work days, they're non-work days. Once you find where you want your activity to start, you click the left mouse button and then start dragging that activity to the right, and it's going to show you the duration and the start and finish date as you drag it out to the right. And once you've reached that target date or duration, you can just let go of the mouse and then it will give you an opportunity to enter a description for that activity. So the description could be something creative like activity 1. Actually, no, let's not do that. Let's do something better than that. Let's do permits. So now you've got your first activity on the canvas, permits, and it's a 63-day activity starting on 2/5, ending on 5/1. Next up, let's talk about adding a second activity. You can see here, activity is already selected as your power tool here. So we're going to just drop our mouse down here and drag to the right. And we'll say clear site. We got a green field here. There you go. Now we have two activities on the canvas. And one's following the other on the same horizontal plane. That's one of the unique and wonderful things about NetPoint is that you can plan multiple activities on the same horizontal plane, which has two big advantages right off the top. One is it saves a lot of room because if you can plan 5 activities across the schedule this way, then you're saving going 5 down this way. So you end up with a lot more efficient use of the space for your planning. Also, it's easier for non-schedulers to follow activity. This finishes and then this one starts when they're one right after the other. So let's add a third activity. We're going to do some foundation work. Spelling is not my strong suit, folks. So if I get anything wrong, you'll just have to forgive me. We don't have spell check yet in NetPoint, but I keep asking for it. So now we're going to see we've got these 3 activities. They all have start and finish dates. They all have durations. But if you grab like clear site and start to push it back, it doesn't have any impact on permits because permits is not yet linked to clear site. Now, how do we link these together? We're going to link them together by, I like to do it this way, just drag a box around the 2 activities and click your link button up here. And now they're linked. So now if clear site starts to push back, it's going to start pushing permits because they have a relationship, a logical relationship, finish to start. Now I'm going to break that relationship just by selecting it and hitting the delete button. Now we're back to no relationships so that I can show you the link chain. So we have a finish to start chain link way that saves you some time and energy if you're linking together multiple finish to starts. That's what this little chain link thing is here. Finish to start chain link. So you click that once you've selected your activities, and then they're all linked together now, finish to start. And so if project start date starts to crawl forward, then you can start to push permits. That'll start to push clear site and foundation. And now you have this chain all linked up. What if we wanted to demonstrate at a higher level something like the end of this? We're going to call this phase 1. So we're going to create a finish milestone, and we're going to link that to the end of foundation, phase 1. So now that I have that finish milestone, it's just floating out in space. It's not connected to anything. But if I connect it back to foundation, you'll see that it's going to snap back to the end of foundation. And so it's always going to track directly with the end of foundation. As foundation goes, so goes the end of phase 1, it being the last activity. So let's do this. Let's knock these down a couple more rows, and let's create a hammock that will demonstrate all the objects that are in phase 1. So you do that by clicking on this hammock tool after you've selected all of the activities you want to be in the hammock. And I'm going to start that on grid number 2. It's going to pop up there and ask for a description. I'm going to say phase 1. So now we have phase one hammock. We could actually move this down so it's in the mix after the milestone. So if you look at different levels, kind of, this bottom part could end up being a level 1, level 2 as you build it out. Up here, you've got a level 1 maybe, and then here a level 0 with just the milestones. So you can see almost different areas of the same schedule, different levels of detail. So moving on from adding activities, let's talk about calendars. I want to bring up our calendar tool. You'll find a lot of this functionality right here in the tools menu, well organized there. And the verb here is usually manage, so we're going to manage some calendars. I'm currently using the US calendar for this schedule. You can use calendar days where there are no non-work days, and you can create your own calendar. So let's do that. Let's create a new calendar. And we're going to call this conference calendar, for lack of a better term. And then what you do is you use a template. So we have many countries in here with their kind of holiday schedule already pre-built. Funny story, when I was working in Shanghai with a group, we brought up the calendar from China here, and there was open laughter in the classroom because China has a lot of different holidays that we did not have in our calendar. So that was a eye-opener. So I'm just going to use the United States calendar here, and then you add to list. And what that does is it adds to your list all the holidays and days off that we have in the United States calendar, and it also selects the non-working days. So if you were happy with that, but in this case, because the conference is on Thursday, we're going to have a non-work day on Friday, so I'm going to leave that as a non-work day. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this really cool feature with weather days. You can go into NOAA and research like 5 or 10 years worth of project or worth of weather history, and you can calculate how many non-work days you're going to have, weather days you're going to have in any given month, and add it here. And what the system will do is it will actually seed statistical sampling and drop those weather days into your calendar. Some will end up already on non-work days just because that's the way the world works. Sometimes it rains on the weekends, but it's a really cool feature that we added a few years back. So I'm going to go ahead and add this calendar. So now instead of just the 2 basic calendars, I have a 3rd calendar in the system. And then if you wanted to apply that calendar, you could apply it system-wide or just to a particular activity. So if we wanted to apply that calendar to this one activity, then all you have to do is come in, go to your dates, and change your calendar for that activity. So now we have that conference option. So we've got a few objects. I haven't talked yet about embeds, which is a really cool feature of LDM, the logic diagram method. It's a way to do start to finish kind of relationships visually and graphically. So let's do a start to start here. You'll notice in NetPoint, for instance, like look at the milestones here. A finish milestone, it's colored in on the right, and a start milestone is colored in on the left. And you can see the same thing here with the start embed being yellow on the left and a finish embed being yellow on the right. So I'm going to do a start embed off clear site. And so now 14 days from the start of clear site, I now have a jumping off point for the start of another activity. And I'm going to add another activity below here in the next lane. And it can go just a little bit longer than clear site, and I'm going to call it fencing. So now we're going to grab that embed, and then I'm going to hold down my shift key and select fencing, and then I'm going to link these two together. So now you can see there's a relationship between that embed and fencing. And so if fencing pushes back, eventually it's going to push back the whole project. On the other hand, if clear sight pushes forward, it's going to start taking fencing with it. So that's the beauty of the interactive self-healing algorithms that we have in NetPoint, is that the network is actually alive, and you can see the impact of decisions and choices that you're making at any given time. So let's move on then and talk briefly about adding resources. Now, the resource functionality in NetPoint is pretty basic, so I don't want to oversell it, but it is super helpful. The one thing we don't have that I'm hoping to see in the future is a resource calendar, the ability to ramp up resources within a single activity. We don't have that functionality yet, so it's pretty much a straight line across one activity. You assign the resources, and they're going to be the same for that whole activity. Now, one way that we've worked around that in the past is to split that activity into subsections and then apply those resources within subsections, which you can do. So you have, let's say that for clearing the site, day 1, you're going to have 10 people on site, but day 31, you're going to have 20 people on site. You could just split clear site into 2 activities and assign the resources 20 on the second activity and 10 on the first. And you'll get that kind of ramp up effect in the resources, but it won't ever be a smooth curve. It's going to be a jump. So let's go back to the manage option here. So tools, and I want to manage my resources. So far, I don't have any resources to manage. So let's create a resource. You do that by hitting the new button. And I'm going to call this resource engineering hours. So we're planning ahead how many folks we're going to need in engineering working on this project. No, they're not a commodity. They are truly professionals. And for cost per unit, I always set this at 1. And the reason I do that is because in NetPoint, you can assign any value you want to a resource. So for instance, you could have a drywall crew, or you could have a drywaller as a single person, or a crew is 4 people, and you assign those resources at whatever level you think you need to for that activity. So it could be dollars, it could be people, it could be units of material, but whatever it is, you get to figure out the math yourself, basically. So I'm going to say, change this to green. Yes, please plot it and add this resource. And then I'm going to create another resource called consulting. And these are also professionals. And we're going to set that to 1. We're going to change their color to be something, let's go with something blue. All right. So now I've got 2 resources set up, but I haven't assigned them to any of these activities in my schedule yet. So I'm going to go ahead and assign consulting services first. So I select consulting services, I say assign, and you can see here, I've got consulting services selected at the top, and then list in order of description, what are my activities. And the only activity that's going to have consulting services is the permits. And that's going to be 5 hours a day for the duration of the permitting process. So if you say 5 hours a day, then every day that that activity is on the canvas, you will have 5 units applied to that activity. If you say by duration, then it's going to take the total duration of 63 days for permits and divide 5 by 63. So you'll end up with a very fractional number. So things never change in the histogram as the duration changes if you assign by day, but the histogram will go up and down based on if you assign by duration. So we have that now, and apologize for that. We have assigned that, and now we're going to go and switch, and we're going to assign engineering hours. And the engineering hours we're going to have for clearing the site is 100 a day, fencing 50 a day, and foundation 150 a day. Now we've assigned those, and you say, well, that's great, Tim, but where's the histogram? You have to close out this window first before the histogram shows up. And now you can see we have the histogram on the screen, and as you're noticing, here's the consulting hours. They don't show up as very many because we have so many more hours assigned in engineering, especially here where we've got these clear site and fencing both assigned some hours. So the cool thing is in NetPoint, if you start moving any of these activities, then the histogram is going to move with them. And so you can actually kind of what if scenario, what's my histogram curve going to look like? And you'll see we've got these 3 lines down here. These 3 lines are showing you accumulation of the resources expended within the project. And they're not giving you a lot of information at the moment. So let's go correct that. So we want to go to tools, and we want to go to modify resource display settings. That's where we kind of adjust the way things look in resources. And within that, right now we're showing the histogram, which is the bar. And then we have these 3 curves set up. We have early dates, late dates, and baseline. So the baseline is the green, that's your planned dates. The early dates is what if everything was on an early schedule, and the late dates is what if everything was on a late schedule, the latest possible. So I'm going to turn off early and late as options, and then I'm going to turn on a plot ruler for the one remaining cumulative curve, which is baseline. And you can see here, it's apparent that we've got 24,000 total hours in this project. When you add up all the engineering hours plus all the consulting hours. So it adds up quick. We're only done with phase 1, and we're projecting 24,000 hours total. If you move activities, of course, the cumulative curve doesn't change, but the histogram does change. So that's resources. Let me just make one change here. I'm going to change the fencing activity assignment. I'm going to add something so that you can see what the per duration versus per day assignment looks like. So let me add a new resource. I'm going to call it fence install. And maybe we have this as a fixed bid. So this is going to be labor. And I'm going to make that kind of a nice silvery color, like a fence. Okay. So right now that isn't assigned to anything. So let's go ahead and do an assignment. We'll do an assignment on fencing. Right now it has engineering hours assigned, but we're going to change that to fence. And fencing is going to be 1,000 hours overall for the full duration. So once that's assigned, now you see the 1,000 hours kind of popping up here over the top of your green hours. And what I wanted to demonstrate to you is as the fencing activity shrinks, the histogram for fencing increases because it's 1,000 hours within the duration. So the longer the duration, the lower the histogram. So that's one of the features in resource planning for NetPoint. Up next, let's talk about the data date and the ability to compare different versions of the schedule baseline versus your last update as an example. So if you drop a data date, that's what this little blue icon is, onto the schedule, it's going to ask you this question. So this is an important question. Do you want to capture this? Your answer should always be yes, because this gives you the option later on to compare different versions of the schedule. So you can see that left of the data date, we have all of permits and part of clear site. So if I go do a right mouse click here on the canvas, I'm going to get a menu up and I want to manage my schedule progress. You'll see these are the two activities that can be progressed at this point, and I'm going to select both of them and say actualize them. So permits will become fully actualized and clear site will become partially actualized. Clear site has 5 days elapsed, 72 days remaining. Permits is locked in at 63 days. Once an activity is actualized or partially actualized, you can't change the actualized portions. So permits right now is locked in place, can't change it, can't move it. It's no longer dynamic. Clear site, you can't move to the left because it's actualized at the start, but you could extend the duration if you needed to in an update. And fear not, if it comes down to it and it turns out you progress this incorrectly, all you have to do is deactualize it, then make your adjustment. Actually, we'll have to deactualize both of these in order to make that happen. Then you can make your adjustment in permits and then reactualize. Now, I'm sure everybody's seen these baking shows where somebody whips a couple eggs together in a pot and then they turn around and they pull out of the oven this beautiful cake. That's what we're going to kind of do now, because I'm going to switch from this window where I've been building these activities to show you things to a more fully built out schedule, which has already been partially progressed here. So you can see we've made some progress in the schedule, and you can see that we've got critical path, which is always highlighted in red in a NetPoint schedule. Critical path passes through. So how could I compare this current update with the baseline? That's the question we're trying to answer here. So in order to answer that, what I'm going to do is try to move out of the way my helpful bar for the webinar, and I'm going to click on this icon here. This is visual target mode. And visual target mode is a really incredible innovation of NetPoint. I don't know anything out there that does this, where you can compare two different schedules, two different updates within the schedule, and see the shadow of the baseline stacked against the actual of the update. And what we've done here is we have some filters built, and the filters will allow you to compare the update and highlight what has changed in the update. So in this case, I'm saying if the finish date is at least 5 days behind the original baseline schedule, then make the activity larger and make it darker green. If the activity is at least 5 days early, then make it a smaller bar and make it light green. So as we look at this schedule, you can see that here's a darker green, larger bar, and here's a lighter green, smaller bar. So we can know immediately, just looking at the schedule as a whole, that there are some activities that are later than they were planned and some that are earlier. And one point that I want to make here is that even though we said if it's late, then make sure and turn it dark green, there's one exception to that rule. And that is if the activity itself is critical on the critical path, then it is not going to turn dark green, it's going to stay red. But you can tell that these activities are thicker than the activities that were just normal or behind or early. So what is the story? What's going on in this schedule? How did we end up here? Well, you can see that originally we had planned on finishing bid award steel earlier than we actually did. So bid award steel came in late and it was on the critical path, Murphy's Law. So bid award steel then pushed shops, that in turn pushed steel joist, in turn pushed this, in turn pushed this, and then eventually you get to the end of the project, which is now running late. And I know what some of you schedulers out there are saying is, well, Tim, I see zeros all along here until you get to this one, MEP process equipment. Why is that 25 days late? That's a very good question. Well, if you look, there's a pretty solid gap here between these two activities. But what doesn't show is that this links through to install and connect process equipment. And then you follow that chain back and it's going to this benchmark. Well, the benchmark in NetPoint is terminal to float. So the float is going to be affected by this benchmark rather than the project end date. When you tie activity to a benchmark, then that is where the float ends. That can come in handy, for instance, if you have a multi-phase project and you want a portion float within phases. You could tie off phase one to a benchmark and give it whatever float you want to give it. And then for phase two, you get to start over on float. So you can see now that this install connect runs 25 days after the benchmark, which is where you get that negative number. Also, you can see that in some cases we made progress where we saved time. Unfortunately, we did not save time on the critical path itself, which is a little unfortunate. Let's go back to the other schedule and we'll talk about import and export capabilities within NetPoint. And then I'm going to wrap a few minutes before the hour so that we have time to take some questions. So probably in about 7 minutes, I'll get through this next section with import and export. So NetPoint has an extremely robust import and export functionality for P6. It has a robust import and export capability for Microsoft Project, and it has a very robust interface with Excel. Let's take a look. I did leave some out. We also interface with OpenPlan. Our XML file will work with Synchro 4D BIM software. So we have a lot of in and outs. NetPoint is based on XML. And so XML is a very freewheeling kind of interchangeable data set. And there's a lot of ways that you can manipulate and create data. I know that some folks have been using NetPoint data through Power BI and other tools like that. So let's start though with creating a Primavera export. So when you go to export to Primavera, there's a few things you should pay attention to back here in NetPoint itself. Now in NetPoint, let me turn on a couple of data points here for us to review. there's so much richness in the data behind NetPoint that sometimes it can be overwhelming. So a lot of folks turn off some of these options as you're working with NetPoint, as to not overwhelm the canvas or overwhelm non-scheduling experts who might not really get what all those numbers mean. So I'm going to turn on drift, float, and total float for these activities. And now you'll see that our drift is minus 68. Our float is 69, which nets you a total float of 1. I'm going to correct that by resetting our project to the start date so that these numbers look a little more reasonable. So we have a drift of 0. What is drift? Drift is like reverse float. It is how far can I move an activity to the left without impacting the start date of the project. So let me pull this start date back a little bit. It's going to pull the activities with it. And then I'm going to pull permits forward a little bit. So now I have how much drift? 25 days of drift. So I could move permits to the left 25 days, or clear site, or foundation, because they're all linked together without a gap. If I put a gap between clear site and foundation, now suddenly I have 43 days of drift. So the point of all this is that drift is not good if you're going to export to P6. Because when you reschedule, push F9 in P6, you're going to end up with the activity sliding to the left and the dates are going to change. How do you correct this? Well, one thing you could do is make sure that there's no gaps between these activities. One way to do that is to go to Edit, Search, and Filter. I want to look for activities, and I want to look for all the activities that have a drift that is greater than 0. It's got a drift greater than 0. I got to look at it before I export. And look at that. I got 4 activities. Which activities are they? I'm going to highlight those. When you highlight activities using this functionality, then everything else fades away and you're just looking at the activities you want to deal with. What if I think, the histogram is kind of annoying right now? Come up here to resource display, click that button, the histogram goes away. And now I'm just looking at how am I going to deal with all these? Well, one thing is, I don't think my project start date's right. If I correct that, that corrects a lot of the problems right out of the bat. So now I have 0 drift, 12 days of drift, 18 days of drift. But I really do want fencing to start on 7/1. So there's 2 ways to deal with that. Well, there's probably more than 2 ways, but one way would be to change this embeds date. If you move that along, which I didn't do, but I can. If you move this date up to 7/1, then you'll have 0 drift. Another thing you could do is you can put a lag right into the link. And if you add a lag, then that's going to get rid of your drift. And another option is to constrain the foundation start date. Double click on foundation, go to dates, start no earlier than. Now you see this little exclamation point tells you you're constrained on the left and your drift goes to 0. So now you have all those things set up correctly. Your schedule is ready to export to P6. And you go over to P6, export. And we're going to ask you some questions. So some of these questions can have a pretty big impact. You got to tell it what name you want. Export to P6 conference. Do you want your calendars to be global or not? I think most of the P6 admins in the world are going to say, no, thank you. I don't want new random calendars coming in globally. Do you want the activity codes? to export. So how do you want to do your resources? Do you want to convert them to per day? And then we have shift work. This is from Sydney at Jacobs, who was one of the rock stars of P6 and NetPoint for many, many years, now retired. But he had a problem where he needed to be able to put in shifts as he exported from NetPoint to P6. So we created this functionality for him. And so I'm just going to go ahead and say, yeah, I want to go ahead and export it. This is going to export everything. It's going to export the logical ties, the create an XER that has, resources, resource assignments, logical ties, everything, durations, dates. And then you just import that into P6. The other cool thing is if you take that same schedule and create an XER and bring it back into NetPoint, it will remember that all of these activities go on this line and what color activities are and all that stuff. So it comes back in pretty good shape, which is a super helpful feature. Let's talk about exporting to Excel. This is another very helpful feature. I go to import export and I want to export to Excel. This creates a linked Excel file, and I'm going to show you what that means in just a minute. I'm going to export everything. So just shoot everything out there and let's take a look. Yeah, sure I am. Okay, I guess I didn't click it. Oh, look who didn't close his Excel. All right, one moment, please. Well, it wouldn't be a demo if everything went perfectly, right? Okay, let's retry this. There we go. At long last, our much promised Excel export should be on the way. Here it comes. So you can see here, all the object data has exported from NetPoint to P6 or to Excel, sorry. And the reason that it's a link spreadsheet is all these bolded titles you can actually change in Excel. So I'm going to change this one to phase 2. And then you go to add-ins and click this little squiggle. And it does the update for you back in NetPoint. So I go back to NetPoint and I think maybe I made a mistake. But that's the basic functionality there. So that's import export, Excel, P6, and I'm ready for questions if anybody has questions.
Hey, Tim, good morning. Great job presenting on how to plan with NetPoint for project planning. We do have some questions from attendees that I'll help read off for you. We also had one attendee that raised his hand during your session, Alex Ortega. Alex, if you can add your question to the Q&A, that's the best way for Tim to answer it. So first question is, can you take a picture or snapshot of your schedule to share it in another file?
Great question, thank you. Yes, under the file menu, if you go to take snapshot, you have two choices. You can do it the full schedule, or you can take a part of the schedule. So you can say, okay, I want to send this to the clipboard, and then once your snapshot is done, then you can paste it into PowerPoint or anything you want.
Excellent. Next question. How can you show drift and float as a default for all activities?
Good question. Up here in objects, if you, at the start of your scheduling process, go to set properties for new activities or new objects, then check drift and float. For every new object that you create, drift and float will show.
Great. Okay, and next question from Samir. Do the durations of activities change when we change to a new calendar?
Yes. So if you change the calendar and the calendar has a different number of working days, the duration will change.
They're still rolling in. So next question. What happens if you do change the page size after you have built a schedule?
Well, it's not the end of the world. It's just kind of a painful process. If you make it bigger, it's not so bad. But if you make it smaller, basically, you're going to end up with things kind of scrunched together. So let me try like a quick demonstration of what it might look like. So you can see if I made this page smaller, then all of a sudden things are not looking the same, right? It's going to be harder to make this look good for a presentation.
Our next question, would the steps to export to MS Project be the same as to P6?
They're very similar, fewer questions. So it is not as detailed a process. So if we export to MS Project, it's basically just, we're going to create the XML file for you. So we don't ask about shifts or resources or that kind of thing.
Another question, with target baseline, is it possible to show the variance dates, but not show any variance equal to 0?
Yes. If I change this window here, back to the target mode, if you see all these grayed out, completely grayed out ones, those haven't changed at all since the last, from the update. So the only ones that are showing variances are the ones that have changed one way or the other, either for the better or for the worse.
Nice. Another question. What is the market adoption for this software? DOTs are stuck to P6.
Yeah, well, yeah, not just DOTs, the whole industry. Although I got to give a shout out to our friends at FACA, who convinced the Canadian ministry to accept NetPoint schedules instead of just MS Project or P6 schedules. So that was pretty cool. But you know, we're not actually, NetPoint is not a replacement for P6. It is a tool to help visualize the schedule, help people collaborate, to see things interactively, to do what-if analysis. And so we're complementary to P6. And I know for sure that lots of DOTs around the country have adopted NetPoint to look at big programs and schedules and try to bring clarity to folks who are not subject matter experts in scheduling.
Nice. And maybe one more, maybe the last one, because we do need to get ready for the next session.
Sure.
When adding a data date onto the schedule, if you click don't capture by mistake, is there a way to recapture it?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. You can just delete that data date and then drop the data date again, and this time answer the question correctly. No harm, no foul.
Maybe need to give some more information. One more question. Can we set up color for each resource? I'll let you answer that, but that is pretty easy.
Yeah, each resource can have a color, and also each even activities or groups of activities can be colored. So for an individual activity, you can just go to the format, and change the color. And then for resources, when you're creating the resource itself, you assign the color. So if you wanted to, you could change the color of this resource to yellow, for instance. All right.
Excellent. I think we wrapped up questions, and I'll let you move on to promoting the next session here in a second. All sessions are recorded. They're going to be available on the site later today. So you can obviously go back, same place you joined the session. You'll be able to see them there. They're available for 30 days. There's also a rate this presentation button. We'd love to get your feedback on this presentation and what you liked, as well as anything else you'd like to see. And I'll turn it over to Tim to promote the next session.
Great. Thanks, Brian. And thanks everybody for signing in. I'm really excited to see this next presentation. As you know, PMA is a innovation hub for our industry, and Dr. Gee and Dr. Vivek are going to present their insights into the algorithmic as-built schedule. You know, we spend a lot of time in the industry doing forensic schedule analysis and kind of rebuilding a schedule, looking at the baseline, comparing the impacts, and Dr. Gee and Dr. Vivek are going to present an amazing new way to do that using the graphical path method and the tools that we've built within PMA. So that's going to start here in just a few minutes. Tune in, take a break if you need to, get a cup of coffee, and don't miss this next one. Thanks a lot.